Well, Tennessee with a valiant effort and a fantastic start, which we haven't said to this point in the season, but the Vols ultimately fall to Georgia 31-17. Welcome to the Last Look, brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, as local vision correction has never been better with Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Look at me, no contacts, no glasses, thanks to my LASIK procedure. Now, we dive into the game. Coming up on the program, we'll have takeaways from the game. We'll also have the report card during the game, our torchbearers, the standouts for Tennessee, the turning point in the game. And there's a lot that you could choose in that regard, including a couple that involve some questionable officiating calls. I'm not one to blame officiating, but there were some questionable calls, and I didn't think Tennessee got the benefit of the doubt really ever, and I thought Georgia did consistently throughout that game. I don't really want to get into the conspiracy theories, but there you go. I know it was out there on Twitter, but
we're going to save that for Monday, guys, because they're not illegitimate. Let's just put that out there.
Okay, fair. All right, so let's get rolling. Caleb, just your early impressions of Tennessee. We'll go to the message board early and often and get your thoughts because we want your reaction. Caleb, I know this sounds like maybe I'm carrying water for Tennessee, and I know that ultimately the Vols did lose. However, I would offer this, Caleb. I would say that Tennessee had no chance with the type of team they fielded in 2022 to win a game like this on the road. And we saw what happened then. Despite the score, which is 2 touchdowns deficit, this Tennessee program is closer to Georgia than they were 2 years ago. And I feel pretty strongly about that. How about you? Please hit the like, the thumbs up button. And if you haven't subscribed before, do so, because we're with you each and every weekday on YouTube. Make sure those notifications are on. 10 a.m. each and every weekday. All right, Caleb, is this Tennessee football program closer to Georgia than they were 2 years ago?
I think they are in a lot of ways. I think that I will say this game showed they're still not on Georgia's level talent-wise. There were just too many clear instances that made that kind of obvious, I have to be honest. But I do think they're a little bit closer in terms of, okay, they can make some battles, 50-50 battles. They're not going to get just obliterated physically. Now, I know what everybody's going to talk about tonight, because the elephant in the room is Tennessee's defensive line did get pretty much handled on the line of scrimmage. And they did. I can't take anything away from that. I think but guys, there were a lot of drives where Tennessee either stopped Georgia or should have stopped Georgia, even with that being said. So I think there were a lot of, with the way Georgia called the game, and I mean, honestly, I can't even believe this, with the way Mike Bobo called the game, with the way Carson Beck played, there were certain reasons the defensive line didn't get the pressure that they typically get, and they still got quite a few stops and won quite a few matchups that they didn't win back in 2022. And that's a big thing. That's just a big thing I want to bring up. And I know people are going to also say the secondary wasn't good, but again, the secondary, I think they were tested a lot. They were pressured a lot more than they usually are, with the lack of pressure up front and Carson Beck just targeting them a lot. And what we're just seeing is that Carson Beck and Georgia is a different team at home. They are the Georgia of old when they're at home.
No, they're not that good. That was a beatable Georgia football team. I still don't think they're that good. And I don't think they're the best team in the SEC, which is up for debate. I thought this was Tennessee's game to win, and I think this is the second time in which Josh Heupel and his staff have been outfoxed at halftime. The other time being Alabama last year. And I think you may have a different take on that Alabama game, and that's fine. But in both particular instances, I thought that Josh Heupel thought that things were going pretty well in the first half and held pat, Caleb, instead of changing things up. And you're right. I have the similar opinion of Mike Bobo as you do. But when you see guys running open as oftentimes as they were, that's good coaching. And Caleb, on the other side, they tricked Nico Iamaleava into a keep in which he was crushed at the line of scrimmage. I thought they took away the deep ball throughout the game. Nico's longest pass was 17 yards. So that'll lead us to the poll question, and I'll get your take on that as well. I blame officiating, Tennessee's players, or Tennessee coaching. How about that? Or let's say what? Let's switch it up a little bit. Let's go Tennessee's offense, Tennessee's defense, coaching, and officiating. Caleb, if I gave you those 4 options, which will be on our YouTube page, and we want you to vote on right now, which would you choose?
I mean, it's equal to me between 3 of the 4. The only one I don't blame is coaching. Funny enough, as much I do blame the offense, I do blame the defense, and I don't think there's much coaching can do when you lose the line of scrimmage on both sides. And it's a SEC story as old as time. You lost the line of scrimmage on both sides, and by the way, even with losing the line of scrimmage, Dylan Sampson still got 100 yards rushing.
Okay, did they lose the line of scrimmage, or did they kind of stalemate the line of scrimmage, especially on Tennessee's offense to Georgia's defense? I thought that Tennessee
that was a stalemate.
I thought Tennessee won enough battles up front there. If they complete one deep pass, again, the narrative of the game changes. If there's a couple of those calls that go against Tennessee, and we'll talk more about that, about officiating, the whole narrative of the game changes as well. Now, on the defensive side, you could say that Tennessee only gave up X amount of yards if you want to, but that's not the way this defense is built. This defense is built to create turnovers, to create sacks, tackles for a loss, and of the above, they had 2 tackles for a loss, no sacks on Carson Beck, who was sacked 5 times last week against Ole Miss and Oxford. And Caleb, they just didn't create enough big plays. If I would have told you that stat going in, you would have said Tennessee's going to lose, but you also would have laughed saying there is no way they're not going to create at least one big play.
Yeah, we're honestly seeing the truth, which is that Georgia's a much better team when Tate Ratledge is fully healthy on the interior.
Yep. And you pointed that out as well earlier in the week. For those that don't know, the offensive lineman the offensive lineman that has been seriously banged up on the interior for a while. Micah Morris had been starting in his place. Micah Morris was out this week. I thought with Micah Morris out and Tate Ratledge playing banged up that there would be some issues. It doesn't look like Tate Ratledge was banged up. He wasn't on the injury report. I thought Kirby Smart was lying about that. He wasn't lying. Tate Ratledge was fully healthy, and he played extremely well. So I can't sit there and we got to give them credit on that. And there's a lot. Look, the defensive line got worked more than the offensive line. You're right. The Tennessee offensive line played to a stalemate. Like I just said, Dylan Sampson ran for 100 yards. I do think there were still moments where the defensive line showed some promise. I don't think they did enough. And I'm not trying to criticize Tim Banks too harshly because I think he's done a superb job this year, but I didn't think they ran enough stunts in this game. I think they just tried to win the one-on-one battles most of the time. They really haven't done a lot of that all year. They thought that, this entire season, his defense was predicated on that. And I tend to agree. And I even thought that in some wins earlier this season, that he's being a little bit too vanilla and relying on the Vols starters, which are very good, and their depth, which is supposed to be exquisite. Here's one of the things that I learned tonight. Tennessee's depth is very good, but they're still second string players when they come in the game. And against Georgia's first string, they lose the majority of those battles. Against another team that maybe is not as good on the offensive line, they win those battles because they have the fatigue factor on their side, Caleb. But as far as Tennessee's second string defensive line and third string defensive line that we've talked about ad nauseum this year, when they came in the game, they didn't dominate. They were fresh, but they didn't dominate.
There's another layer to this also. And part of this is good preparation, but not good in-game adjustments. You notice there were a lot of batted balls by Tennessee's defensive line. That's a good positive for them, right?
Yes. It's good coaching too by Rodney Garner to be aware and get your hands up. Go ahead.
I agree. Yes. One of the things that they knew that Georgia likes to do are those quick timed routes to the tight ends in the middle of the field and those quick screens on the outside. You notice Mike Bobo loves those, right? And if you guys were following Twitter early, everybody on Georgia Nation wanted Mike Bobo fired like in that moment when Tennessee was up 10-0. I think a lot of the reason they didn't bring pressure, Dave, is I think they were so hesitant to go all in because they were worried that there was going to be a quick pass because they'd studied that all week. And so they were ready to bat a ball down. Because you saw Joshua Josephs had 2 on the edge. Amari Thomas had 2 in the middle. They kept doing it. I think they were more worried about the timed routes than they were about getting the pressure on Beck. And I think had Mike Bobo stuck to the game plan that he had done last week and in the previous weeks, that would have worked for Tennessee. But the truth is Mike Bobo adjusted. And that's how that happened. And Tennessee didn't really adjust. But I think it's hard as a defensive lineman when you're coached to, as you always talk about, play with your hair on fire. And then you're coached in this game, guys, just be a little bit careful because they're going to do a lot of these quick timed routes because they love that. And then they go away from that in the second half completely. And you're kind of still debating, do I bring pressure or do I, drop back and try to bat a ball down? And I do think that got Tennessee. Even on the corner blitzes, did you ever notice, Dave? Boo Carter had one. And there was another one, too, where they're going on a corner blitz. They got pressure on Beck, but they hesitate for a minute because they're worried there's going to be a quick screen dump off behind them. And that happened a bunch.
Just not to interrupt your flow here, but on the punt return, how in the world do you not block the punter? I mean, I couldn't catch the number, but he was on the punter. You've got to put that guy in.
The easiest guy to block. Also, Boo Carter's got to cut that to the outside.
Boo Carter, that play was over. He was scoring on that play.
Yeah, no, you're right. But Boo Carter's got to cut that to the outside. Let's be honest.
I agree with you, but he shouldn't have even had to make a decision.
That's true. You're right.
The punter's got to be in the ground. He's expecting the punter to be in the ground.
Yes, that's a great point. That's a great point. And by the way, that totally changes the complexion of the game at the end of the game if you score a touchdown right there.
Totally. Absolutely. Speaking of the game and some turning points, let's go ahead and get to the turning point of the game. Caleb will bring you that, and it's brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
I'm interested to see where you'll go here, Caleb, because there's a lot of different turning points in this game. And I'm also interested to see if you will call out some officiating because, again, I'm not one. I've never, ever in my broadcast career come on and blame the officials. And I'm not blaming the officials. And I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy behind any of this to keep Georgia in play because at 9-3, they're probably not. Maybe, but probably not. But if you wanted to choose an officiating call here, I wouldn't hold it against you, Caleb.
Well, I will get to the issues with the officiating, but I don't think an officiating call was a turning point in the game. The turning point in the game was the last play of the first quarter. Do you remember it, Dave?
Yes.
It's 3rd and 8, guys. It's 3rd and 8. Tennessee's up 10-0. They're on track to get the ball back. And James Pierce, I believe it's Pierce, jumps off sides. Georgia gets a free play, and Carson Beck throws a pass over the middle of the field that's caught for 38 yards where Jamal McCoy could have broken it up. But Jamal McCoy looked totally dejected that Georgia had a free play, Dave. And I think Jamal McCoy is great. I love him. But sometimes you got to accept that you're just going to have to get 2 stops. And he just couldn't mentally bring himself to do that. Georgia converts. That changes everything. That conversion right there changes everything. Dave, if James Pierce doesn't jump off sides and if Tennessee gets that stop, because the play was going to be there to break up if James Pierce doesn't jump off sides. Tennessee's breaking up that play, and they're getting the ball back. Do you realize how much momentum they're about to get, getting the ball back up 10-0 in the second quarter?
No, you're right. I'm going to go with, instead of that one, I'm actually going to go with the very clutch run by Carson Beck because I think that there was a potential for him going into a shell at that point. And I think Carson Beck did a fantastic job of playing without any turnovers after, again, having, what was it, 11 in the past 5 games, Caleb? It's been absolutely horrendous. But it was the one run that he had that was about 32 yards where he split the gap there and got hit. And we talk about Nico likes getting hit. That's what his coaches say and all that. But that may be an easy one, but I'm going to go with that one because I think if not for that play, he's still trying to find himself. And if he's still trying to find himself into halftime, then perhaps Tennessee is in better position. But that, to me, that run, Caleb, if you recall it, that was the one where he seemed to settle and feel comfortable.
Was that their scoring? Was that their field goal drive right at the end of the first half?
Yes.
Yes. And you know what, you're right. I'm not going to knock that either because they could have wilted after Tennessee scored another touchdown to go up 17-14, and they didn't. Now, part of this is Carson Beck is playing at home. He feeds better off his home crowd than he does the road crowd. I think we've seen that a lot. But yeah, I think that I can get with you on that Carson Beck run right there. If I was going to, we can get to the officiating. I was really going to call you out if you brought up the touchdown run because they've tried to say there was a defensive hold there. There were 2 blatant offensive holds by Georgia on Carson Beck's touchdown run, just as clear as day, obvious.
Yep.
And it is what it is. We can, there again, I will touch on that, but yeah, I think that I can't knock your turning point either.
Our poll question is pretty red hot right now. And by red hot, we mean that it's evenly debated, and it is. Tennessee's defense is getting the biggest part of the blame pie, which we'll get to Caleb's blame pie at 39%, followed by coaching at 29%. Tennessee's offense, 16%, officiating at 16%. I guess that's because a lot of people are comfortable with Tennessee not having a deep game. But that to me is a real issue and is not only evident in the fact that Tennessee doesn't connect in that way, but they're not confident enough to take those shots. Georgia came out and took some deep shots to loosen Tennessee up in the beginning of the game and the second half. You don't even see Tennessee taking those shots. I just don't think they have any confidence in Nico Iamaleava able to deliver that ball, which to me is so stunning because you're combining a guy with an elite arm and Josh Heupel's offense. If I would have told you before the season, Caleb, that the deep ball or lack thereof would even be a part of the blame pie in November, you would have laughed me off the show.
Oh, I would have. What did I say to you, Dave, a while back? Nico is created in a lab to run Josh Heupel's system. I didn't want to hear and I got corrected by a lot of people that came on our show. Heath Schuler corrected me. Jimmy Hyams corrected me. They've all been right, by the way. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to hear the whole he's got potential, he's got to develop, because in my opinion, a quarterback created in a lab to run an offense doesn't develop. They immediately take over and they're dominant. And just didn't happen with Nico Iamaleava. Now, there was the pass pro issues early. He was banged. You can maybe say he was a little more banged up in this game. But and then the other part that we have to point out, Dave, is this is where this is very similar to 2022. One area where they're similar, Georgia's corners hang with Tennessee down the sideline. They left their corners on an island in this game. And quite honestly, Tennessee couldn't take advantage of that. I mean, I just don't think there's any way around that fact that Tennessee could not take advantage of the fact that Georgia kept their corners on an island. Even Dante Thornton, who is supposed to be their, their strength, just, I just don't understand where Chris Breisel is.
I don't understand.
They use him on a lot more of the, seems like they use him a lot more for the short passing game, which he was effective early, but I guess I'm with you on that.
Well, overall. I was told by a source in Tennessee's preseason camp that he was spectacular at catching jump balls and deep balls. I don't understand why he can't run a go route. You throw to him once a half. Boom. He's a physical freak. Dante Thornton has to be running open, which he often is because he's incredibly fast. Chris Breisel can catch a jump ball. And right now, I like Nico's chances of completing a deep ball as a jump ball more than just a smooth throw and catch. I just haven't seen that except against much lesser competition. And I think his deep ball arm is something that he'll work on and something that'll get a lot better. in the offseason. But again, that's very surprising. So the blame pie is what? And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you lay out the blame pie, and then I'm going to pick the one that I think is number one. So I'm not going to debate you on the percentages per se, but I do want to – I want to pick one because I feel pretty strongly about it. So, Caleb, go ahead. The blame pie.
Okay, so I'm going to separate these things out, and Dave, I will let you tell me if I'm unfair on this, okay? I call some people out by name and some people not. But let's just get rolling here because there may be some people you're not high on me calling out. I'm going to start with the edge rushers. I think the edge rushers get 45% of the blame. People are going to call out the tackles, but honestly, if you've watched Tennessee all year, the defense, look at Georgia's inability to run the ball, Dave. They couldn't run the ball. So clearly it was the defensive tackles that were the problem. The edge rushers weren't taking advantage on the outside. You got to put this on Pearson Josephs more than you do Amari Thomas and Omar Norman Lott.
I'm not arguing. I agree. But 106 yards and the 32-yard gallop by Carson Beck was because of poor gap discipline by the tackles. I'm not arguing. I agree. But I just want to throw that out there. All right. What's next?
Well, I'm going to go there because I'm not so sure it was a poor gap discipline. I think, and one of them did get hurt. I think another 30% goes to the linebackers.
Okay. Now, so you would be referring to the second level in which they weren't defending Carson Beck on that particular run?
Yes.
That's fair. I don't know the assignments. I don't know if they were supposed to rip and run upfield. You may be right. And you do have a situation in which Jeremiah T. Lander is the backup, and I don't think he's been as effective.
Guess how many tackles he had in this game?
Oh, I don't have it in front of me. How many?
1. I know tackles is a glorified stat. I get it, guys, but your middle linebacker should find a way to get more than 1 tackle in a game. Is that fair?
There's no arguing that. Okay. Who's next? What's our percentage at now?
All right, so I'm already at 75%. But
yeah, I was wondering, you get 45% just the edge rushers. I'm like,
I get 75% to the edge rushers and linebackers. I do. I think those are those units by themselves prove very costly.
Well, we're going to agree because I will just go ahead and tell you mine was the front 7 in general. If I had to pick one of all those that you might mention. So I want to hear the rest of yours, though, as far as the percentages and slicing up the pie.
Okay, so the next in, I'm going to split this to about 20% 3-way. So I think I'm going to have to give a solid 10%, Dave, to the offensive tackles. They weren't terrible. They've gotten better, but John Campbell did pick up a bad holding penalty. Lance Hurd had a bad false start, and there were quite a few times. Nico was sacked 3 times in this game. Some of that was coming around the interior, but it looked like, and you know this, Dave, with offensive linemen, it looked like Javonte Spraggins missed a couple of blocks, but I actually think that was more on Campbell not picking up the right guy, and Spraggins was kind of left out in the dust. And so on that, I'm going 10% offensive tackles.
Yeah, and we do have to, he's a big part of what we do at Off the Hook Sports, but we do have to point out, I think Cooper Mays got beat for, I don't know technically if that will be held against him because it looked like the guard rolled into him, but I thought he gave up his first sack since guess when? This was on the Vol Report brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning.
Well, I know because I saw your tweet.
Yeah, the Alabama game in 2022. So I'm not holding it against him. I mean, that's facing a lot of elite defensive linemen and a lot that have been nose up on him. So because so many teams play that 3 down front against Tennessee. All right, so the rest of your blame pie?
Yeah, I got a few more, and there are 3 that get to 5%. I'm only going to put 5% on Nico Iamaleava. I don't think he had a lot of chances to make big plays tonight. I think a lot of the time the game was taken out of his hands. The only one I put on him is he did have they took 1 deep shot. Dante Thornton was there, and he missed it. And you got to hit that when Heupel calls it.
Okay, but let me ask you this. Blame pie for this game or blame pie for 2 losses at this point in the season? Because I think the fact that he's not able to connect on deep balls is really hampering this offense.
I think so too, but I think it's just for this game. He didn't have a lot of opportunities, and maybe he was hurt. Maybe he was banged up. I don't know the reason, but
okay. But are the lack of opportunities because of his lack of inaccuracy previously, I guess is what I'm digging at.
Maybe. So maybe you could put it there, but I can only, I take these blame pies in a vacuum.
No, that's right.
In a vacuum,
I agree with you. I'm completely with you. I would not put most of this on Nico. This offense is what it is. It has to be efficient underneath. And for the most part, it was. It just doesn't have any pop.
It doesn't. So 2 more 5%ers real quick.
Everybody gets a piece. This is like
everybody. One is Dante Thornton. There was a drop pass that was really bad that he had. I mean, a really, really, really bad drop pass.
Nope, I agree. He was wide open.
Wide open. So
looked like he hadn't practiced all week.
Yeah, no, that's true. And then the other one, I got to say, Jamal McCoy, 5%. Jamal McCoy had his worst game as a cornerback to this point. There was another cornerback who played. As a matter of fact, the Tennessee secondary overall didn't play too poorly, but Jamal McCoy had an awful game.
Yep. I thought Ricky Gibson on the other side probably played better than McCoy.
He did.
Broke up what would have been a touchdown pass, and at one point, I think he got the benefit of the doubt. I don't think he was actually pushed on that offensive pass interference. I don't think the arm was touching him when it looked like it extended. Go back and watch that video. I think Tennessee did get an officiating break on that one.
Okay, but then on the other side, there was a clear as day pass interference on Squirrel White.
Oh, I'm with you. Tennessee, listen, I've been an official, Caleb. So let's address the 800-pound elephant in the room real quick. I've been an official in basketball. I've been an umpire, flag football with a bunch of drunken fraternity boys. And I'm trying to think of what else. I've even done tennis for that matter. So I do believe firmly that you can get caught up in a game in a home environment or a comeback or something of that nature, and subconsciously you can give the benefit of the doubt to the team that either has the momentum or is at home. I think that happened with me one time when I was self-critiquing myself as an 18-year-old umpire. Caleb, but I don't think that any official came into this game saying, man, it would be nice if Tennessee and Georgia were still alive for the college football playoff. I don't think anything like that ever happens. Do you?
It's hard for me to say it doesn't.
Especially after that Mike Tyson fight, by the way. Ugh.
Yes, that is true. Oh, God, that was bad. But here's why. Look, I'm going to say this because everybody complains about SEC officials. Guys, let me just get this up front. It's way worse in other conferences. I don't know if you got a lot of people don't watch it as much, but this was particularly clear in the college football playoff era of just 4 teams. Dave, have you ever watched Pac-12, ACC games or anything like that? Those refs worked overtime to make sure that the team that could get to the playoff won every game. And
look at him.
It was very obvious. And it's been obvious this year with the ACC with some of the protections for Miami and Clemson. There was a desire to try to get and work their way into 2 teams in. The same with the Big 12. BYU getting that horrible call to beat Utah last week. Nobody wants to see BYU lose because if they go undefeated and lose the Big 12 title, the Big 12 could get 2 teams in. It's very clear as day. It's probably less obvious in the SEC than in any other conference because the SEC doesn't have to do that. But, I mean, look, I'll just tell you this. 2009, when that was the one year where the 2 favorites to win the division were also 2 of the favorites to go play for the national title. And I'm talking about Alabama and Florida, obviously. Nick Saban, Alabama, Florida with Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow. And I never saw more protections for 2 teams than Alabama and Florida that year to go undefeated so they can manipulate that SEC title game where Alabama and Florida played. So I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. And let's put this out there. Tennessee loses their CFP chance. They showed this. It's 53%. Georgia loses, their CFP chance is down to 36%. Georgia's at home. The SEC is trying to make sure they get that 5th team in. I mean, I'm just saying, it's not about putting Georgia in over Tennessee, Dave. It's about trying to
keep 2 alive. Okay. Yeah. I don't think that would ever because here's why. I never watched the Tour de France a lot before, but I was aware that it was on and I kept track of it and I learned about all the cheating. I will never watch another boxing match unless it's highly sanctioned after that disaster against with Mike Tyson and Jake Paul. I've had issues with other sports as well. If that ever got out that a conference had given any sort of directive whatsoever, it would destroy the integrity of the sport. So I look at it.
Do you not think the NBA has rigged games to try to get a game 7?
I don't think so. Because here's why. Let me tell you why. I'm not saying morally that they wouldn't do it. Okay. I'm just saying pragmatically, as a businessman, okay, it wouldn't make sense to risk that and lose everything. Does that make sense? Like that one game 7 or that extra team from the SEC in the college football playoff, in this instance, would not be worth it to me for some memo or email to come out that said, hey, Mr. Official, it would be really nice if Georgia won tonight. Does that make sense?
I mean, you could say it in a smoke-filled room where there's no record of anybody saying anything.
That's
true.
It's not,
I mean, the mafia didn't send emails or write letters to people. They just like, it'd be real rough. It'd be real bad. It'd be real unfortunate if you didn't do this today. And
that's true.
That's all you got to do.
I watched Godfather this weekend. All Michael Corleone said, you can have my decision right now. And the next thing that guy knows is he's got a dead prostitute in his hotel room.
Before we move on, can I play a minute clip of this is kind of a little bit breaking from us, but apparently Josh Heupel got heated when asked in a post-game presser about the face mask.
Let's go for it right now.
So this is, guys, this is Josh Heupel talking.
Particularly about the officiating?
About, you remember the face mask on Ricky Gibson where the player's helmet came off and there was clearly clear as day no face mask?
Yes, he was hot about that, and that was a bad call. I thought the camera angle was bad on it, and even the in-booth official missed it. But let's go ahead and hear what Josh Heupel had to say.
Yeah, and here's what he said about that. And I think he addresses the substitution penalty too, but here we go.
It's a good football team. We're a good football team too.
Josh, a follow-up on the face mask. When you watched the replay,
Yeah, what did it look like?
It looked like the back of the helmet popped off. We didn't see a hand on the face mask. What was the explanation?
Can you repeat that?
It looked like a helmet popped off, so there wasn't a hand on the face mask.
He's turning the mic towards the reporter.
Next question. Did they give you an explanation of why it was called?
Next question.
Anything else for Coach?
You want to ask about the 12 men on the field?
I would, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. We'll have players short.
So
both times for those on our audio platforms, he turns the mic to, I can't tell who that is.
To the reporter.
Who the reporter is. I couldn't exactly figure out who that was. Hey, listen, the substitution penalty, Jackson Boy's got to get off the field.
Okay, here's my thing with the substitution penalty. Was it the right call? Yes, it was. Was Tennessee trying to manipulate getting a little bit of a breather in that moment and throwing Georgia off the rhythm? Yes.
No, I just think Jackson Moore was lazy.
I think they never call that. Ever. I
agree with that. And they certainly never have a review. That's the first time I have seen a review for that type of substitution penalty.
You have seen a review for a substitution penalty, though. That's when Chuck Smith ran 17 defensive linemen on the field.
It's true. They're still running out on the field in Tiger Stadium.
Yes. There were okay, so I think he was jogging off. I thought he was trying to manipulate something, but either way, typically, Dave, and maybe I'm crazy, but when an offense substitutes, the ref stands over the ball. They didn't even stand over the ball in that situation.
Well, and in that situation, if you were to call 12 men on the field and then review it and it was upheld, I'm fine with that. But correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't a flag thrown and they review it. And that to me that's unprecedented. I've never seen that.
Well, yeah, no, that's what I mean. The Chuck Smith 13 men, that was actually reviewed. Originally, it wasn't called, so everybody thought Tennessee won. And then they went back and reviewed it and saw the 13 men, and that's when they threw the flag against LSU in 2010.
That's like comparing a small little grease fire to like an inferno of a 80-story building. I mean, that, of course, that one at LSU, you got to look at it because it's just mayhem. This is one guy 1 yard short of the sideline, Caleb.
Yeah, okay.
Not even a yard, a stride. And
honestly, kind of in the air when the ball's being snapped.
If I'm the TV executives, I don't even like that because I'm like, why are you slowing down the game for a stupid substitution penalty?
Can I also get a little conspiratorial on this?
You can.
The Dante Thornton drop. All right, I'm going to throw this out here. Chris Fowler called it soft and everything like that and was making fun of the cold and everything. But the heater being warm that the Tennessee receivers sit on when it's, guys, I know 55 degrees is not that cold, but when it's 55 and windy and you're sitting idle, you do get a little chilly. Spoiler alert. You do get a little rusty. You do get a little thrown off your rhythm. The Dante Thornton drive, the drop happened right after that.
Okay, I do not believe that they messed with the heater. You
don't think they messed with the heater?
I say that, and I went to a high school that when we played a more up-tempo inner city team, I'll just I'll put it like that they turned the heat up in the gym by like 6 degrees for that one team, for that one. So it's like you'd be sitting there sweating. You're like, oh my gosh, it's just a fan. It's so hot in here. So I don't believe that would happen.
Are you sure you don't believe that would happen?
You've got me at 40-60, let's put it that way, which is a lot further than I would have predicted you could have got me. Now, I think that one thing that needs to be said and why I don't think this is gloom and doom time, even though this is a very hurtful loss, Tennessee can still make the college football playoff. Connor Stallions unplugged the seat heater. He's got that's probably it. Tennessee can still make the college football playoff, has a 54% chance of doing that. And they certainly look like, and I know it's not as simple as this, but they look like one of the 12 best teams in the nation to me. That game, I wonder if the committee looks at every game, and we've discussed that before, because that was not a 14-point game, was it? Felt like a one-score win that Georgia controlled at the end.
It was definitely not like the 2022 game.
Right.
Put it that way.
Where we knew after a quarter that Tennessee wasn't going to win that game.
We were watching that game. I think Dave and I were texting fun enough, and we felt, it was after a quarter. I didn't know Tennessee wasn't going to win, but I'm like, it's going to take like some crazy lucky plays. It would take like 2003 Miami implosion of 4 or 5 turnovers, that type of game for Tennessee to win. And Georgia didn't do that. I honestly, in this game though, I thought the same thing. And when we get to the takeaways in a second, I'll break it down, but it's not like Tennessee wasn't going to need a couple of breaks to go its way to beat Georgia in this game, no matter what, if everything's equal. But football is a game of breaks.
I didn't think they needed any breaks. And I still, after watching that game, don't think they needed any breaks. They just needed breaks not to go against them.
I think they needed a couple of breaks.
If Thornton makes the catch, if they don't have 5 questionable officiating moves, Tennessee wins this game. If it's just straight up, if things happen as they're supposed to happen. They didn't need a fumble to be in the game.
But you can point to some mistakes. It's not like Georgia didn't have a couple of drops and have a couple of mistakes here and there too. So, I mean, that's what I mean. Yes, those things happen, but it's not like Georgia didn't give Tennessee a couple of breaks too. I think everybody forgets the other side on how breaks go. So everybody looks at the breaks they gave another team and they always forget the breaks the other team gave them. So, I think that one of my favorite lines of all time, this is Caleb doing a Johnny Majors rant story, but when during the Miracle at South Bend, when Tennessee came back to beat Notre Dame 35-34, they were down 31-14 at halftime, and Johnny Majors goes, well, we were really up 14-10, but we gave up 21 points off turnovers. And I'm like, okay, but you say that, but one of your touchdowns was also a blocked field goal run back for a touchdown. That wasn't a turnover. You know what I mean? You don't count that.
Blocked by a guy's butt as well. All right. So, Caleb, let's get to the takeaways. Takeaways brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Look at me. No contacts, no glasses. That's because I had LASIK vision correction. CCTeyes.com.
To visit ccteyes.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at ccteyes.com. Simply the best.
All right, Caleb, key takeaways from Tennessee's frustrating loss to Georgia 31-17 in Athens?
Oh, the first one is the Vols pass rush was neutralized, completely neutralized. I think we've already talked about this. They had zero pressure on Carson Beck. Carson Beck was able to be a statue back there. And it, we can talk about this, but not so sure James Pierce's draft stock didn't drop tonight after this game.
Yep. I'm not so sure it hasn't dropped as well. It has dropped as a whole because coming into the season, he was projected as the number 1 overall pick. And since he's been
but until this game, he had been impacting plays, even if he wasn't getting the sacks. He was not impacting anything in this game.
And he was at least a part of a sack for 6 consecutive games coming into this game. So I'm going to say that that's more Georgia being good up front offensively than Pierce or Tennessee's defense being bad.
Yes, but if Pierce is elite and a top 10 pick, you do well against. This is like my argument when Fred White tried to defend Tennessee, and I love Fred, but it wasn't his fault. But he was trying to defend Peyton Manning losing to Memphis in 1996. He's like, Memphis had all these draft picks in the NFL. I'm like, yeah, but he's Peyton Manning. He's the number 1 draft pick. He should score more than 17 points.
You say the same thing about Will Anderson getting completely neutralized against Tennessee in 2022, right?
Yeah, you could. Exactly. Like, yes, I get Darnell Wright's elite, but Will Anderson was a Heisman contender. So you expect him to show up against those teams.
Point. All right. What's our next takeaway, Caleb?
All right. So next is going to be, and I'm going to throw a positive Tennessee's way real quick. I'll throw a bone. But Tennessee won the run game battle. We got to give some credit. If things had gone a little differently, they ran the ball really well in the second half. And I'm going to say this, Dave. I think Joey Halsley abandoned the run game way too easily in the second half. I think they should have kept it on the ground in the third and fourth quarters.
Well, you say that, but Tennessee did have the long drive to open the fourth quarter that really, when they had a punt, put their back against the wall.
Yeah,
I could argue the other side and say they should have taken a couple more deep shots, to be honest with you.
Maybe they should have. Can we settle on they overworked the short passing game? Because
but you could. But Caleb, here's the thing. I mean, that's just where they are, and Georgia knows that. Georgia knows that their chances of completing a deep ball with like Hendon Hooker in 2022 was like 35%, but the chances of completing a deep ball with Nico is probably like 10% against quality competition. So I think they're going to just be sure and take that away, play the run.
I think on that on that final punt you're talking about, Dave, at the end, late in the game before Georgia went on that long drive, there was a 1st and 10, and they called a pass play where Nico ended up scrambling for 4 yards. You give it to Dylan Sampson on that play. Georgia's reeling. Georgia's reeling. They're on their toes. You got to start.
Or on their heels.
You're on their heels. Excuse me. Yeah, you've got to. You don't. I bet you if they give it to Dylan Sampson right there, he gets another 10-yard gain. And so that's kind of where I'm at. And I just don't feel like they utilized Dylan Sampson even as much as they should. He only had 19 carries. And look, he was already starting to wear down their defensive line late in the second quarter. Okay.
Well, you flipped me because I'm more oftentimes going to be a running the football type of guy anyway. All right. What's next, Caleb?
All right. Next, and this is a issue with Tennessee whenever they're on the road, it feels like, but penalties plagued them. I mean, they had 9 penalties for 70 yards, and 3 of those we've talked about the offsides penalties, 3 offsides penalties, a John Campbell holding penalty, a false start by Lance Hurd. There was a pass interference, that pass interference on Jermon McCoy, which is why he gets a blame pie. At first, I thought that was uncatchable. I went back and looked, and that was a catchable ball. That was a good call. That pass interference, people are going to complain about that. No, that was a pass interference on Jermon McCoy.
Yep.
Very clearly.
All right. What other takeaways?
All right. So next on this is the big plays weren't there in the passing game. And we've talked about that. No deep shots whatsoever, except one to Dante Thornton. They worked the tight ends well, but they just didn't. I'm with you. I don't know why they're not taking these deep shots. And I don't know what the issue is here, but they're not.
2 things. I think the receivers are slightly overrated compared to preseason expectations. I don't think they're getting separation against really good defensive backs. And I think the other thing is Nico's arm. I think it's a 50-50. I don't think it's a one-call shot. I don't think that he's accurate downfield. That's not to say he won't be. Joe Milton wasn't accurate downfield, but he was a senior. About a redshirt freshman who's probably as cool and calm and collected as he is. He's got to be a little amped at times. All right, Caleb, any other takeaways from the game before we get to the report card?
Yes. The other one, just missed opportunities, guys. There was Dante Thornton had that drop pass that we keep coming back to. There was the unrecovered fumble that Tennessee had in the first half. Georgia has a fumble. Tennessee needs to be able to recover that fumble right there. By
the way, the pass, the underneath shovel pass, that's completed pass and a fumble.
You thought he completed it? I thought he dropped it immediately.
I thought he had both hands on it, tucked it, fumbled it.
Okay, well, the one that got me outraged more was that squirrel white pass they called incomplete.
Yep.
The one he's going to the ground. Yeah. But yeah, there were a lot of missed. Yeah, but I could see that. Yeah, that definitely should have been a fumble. And I was ready because that was a dumb call by Mike Bobo, by the way. I was ready to do the Mike Bobo special, like Georgia's driving and Mike Bobo tries to get creative and he screws it up. But
I thought he would have had a substantial gain if he just catches it cleanly.
I was texting my brother. I was like, all right, don't worry. The Mike Bobo special is going to come at some point. And it never came. And when it came, it was right there, but it just didn't happen. Okay, so yeah, just missed opportunities. I think that's Georgia. We talk about breaks and no breaks, and this is what I mean, Dave. Georgia gave Tennessee a chance at breaks, and Tennessee didn't take advantage of it. It's the whole play for and make the breaks, which is General Nealon's second game maxim. That's only partially true. It's not just play for and make the breaks. It's that, take advantage when a break comes your way. And Tennessee didn't do it.
All right. Report card brought to you by our good friends, Drs. Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, cctieyes.com. Where do we want to start on the report card?
So the report card for Tennessee's loss to Georgia starts at quarterback. And I am going with, Dave, believe it or not, I'm going to go with a B-. Is that unfair? Is that too high?
For whom?
For Nico. A B-.
No, I don't have a problem with that.
I think
especially
Nico
if you want to grade it on a curve coming into the game, knowing that he has issues with the deep ball, then you give him a B+.
He's banged up. He was under pressure. His receivers aren't getting separation. Joey Halsley limited what he could do. And he, I think he actually maximized what could have been possible given all those. So I'm going to give him a B-, even though his stats were pedestrian. Running backs, I'm going to go A-. Do you have any issue with how Dylan Sampson and Peyton Lewis played? Outside of one missed block by Peyton Lewis. There was one really, really bad missed block by Peyton Lewis.
I don't. No, I think I think Dylan Sampson is the best running back in the country at maximizing what is been blocked for. If it's 7 yards, that's opportunity, he gets 7 yards. If it's 3, he gets 3. I think he's absolutely the best in the country, including Ashton Genty at that. So I thought he did that. There wasn't one single run that I looked at and I thought, man, you could have gotten a couple more yards if you did that or this, or you could have cut here and really broke a big one. He hasn't had a run like that all year, to be quite honest with you, Caleb. I think he's an incredibly naturally talented running back.
I think so too. And he showed it again in this game. And he also just, you're at the level of how hard he runs. We had Philip Fulmer on who mentioned specifically Travis Henry, and I'm going to go there with Dylan Sampson. Now, he's not like the same block of cheese Travis Henry is, but at the same time, he runs as hard as Travis Henry did. So I'm going to give him props on that.
To me, and I'm not just saying this because I am a Cowboys fan and I grew up watching them, he's Emmitt Smith reborn. There's not a lot of spectacular runs, but he maximizes every single run. Emmitt Smith only had like 2 incredible Barry Sanders top runs in his whole career, but it's every carry other than that. He maximized every single run. And I feel like Sampson does that. To me, it's an easy comparison.
I could see that.
his big play came because the blocking was perfect. So that's not him necessarily having Eric Dickerson speed or Bo Jackson speed, or it's just him hitting the hole with intention and doing the right thing. All right, that brings us to Tennessee's offensive line. Where do you have them? And then we'll get to the wide receivers, who I think have been overrated throughout the year.
Offensive line gets a C. I thought there were some major issues in pass pro. I mean, it's the story of all year. Pass pro issues, but run blocking fine. So evens out C.
All right, wide receivers. Somebody on the message board already says D-. Are you on that low?
I went C with wide receivers. Excuse me. There were some plays made by the wide receivers. There weren't a ton of opportunities. And look, I think there were other issues involved.
Are we including the tight ends in this?
No. I'm giving the tight ends an A. I think the tight ends played amazing.
I would agree with that. Miles Kitselman had 4 receptions. He had the touchdown run as well. 4 receptions for 46 yards. Listen, but Tennessee's receivers, if I can do the math really quick, had 10 just receivers, either wide receivers or slot receivers, had just 11 catches for 88 yards.
Maybe I could go D. You could talk me down to a D, honestly. Yeah. Maybe I will. I'll go D+. How about that? D+.
I can roll with that.
All right. So and tight ends definitely get an A.
Yep. Tight ends with an A. Kitselman Stays also had a catch. And again, I go back to Dante Thornton, targeted twice, had the drop. I thought he half ran out of bounds, might have run out of bounds and been an ineligible receiver on the deep ball. They didn't have to say anything about it because it was incomplete, but I'm not sure if he completes that ball if he's not an ineligible receiver. All right, so defensive line on the other side.
All right, so defensive line is a D. Defensive line is a D. And the defensive tackles, I don't really hold this against them at all. I put this solely on the edge rushers. The defensive tackles were commanding the attention they need. They were batting down balls at the line of scrimmage. Joshua Josephs and James Pierce. I'm not going to say they weren't. I think the biggest problem looking back, we're going to go back and look at this, Dave. They were coached this week and preparing to drop into coverage more than they did.
Nope. Got no argument with that. And then linebackers, I know you're not high on. I'm going to predict a D from you.
It's enough. You're going to go back and watch the linebackers play in this game, Dave, and they were horrible.
Oh, it's an F. Okay, I misunderstood you. Okay, an F. Okay, I don't have an argument with that. I don't. I just think there's been a major fall off from Keenan Pili to Jeremiah T. Lander.
Yeah, I agree. When we talk,
T-Lander may end up being an all-SEC player in a year or two, but he's clearly not ready.
When we compare this to the 98 defense, that was always where there was the biggest gap to me Al Wilson to Jeremiah T. Lander. And secondary, I'm going to go B-. I'm going to say if Jermon McCoy didn't have the worst game of his career, you could have pushed the secondary to an A-. And everybody's going to blame the secondary because Carson Beck threw for 370 yards. Guys, what's the secondary supposed to do when they're not getting any pressure up front? I mean, no. Is there any secondary, Dave, in football that can do anything in that situation?
Not really. You can't guard people longer than 4 seconds. Really?
Yeah.
A 2.8, I think, is the average. All right. So special teams. You were so hard on Max Gilbert earlier this year.
No, I was not. That would be Dave. Place kicking was an A+. And Dave, where is your apology to Max Gilbert?
Hey, I never said that they should bench him. I just thought they should open it up or do something after he went 0 for 3 against Kentucky.
Yeah. How do you feel now? Huh? How do you feel?
I'm good with him. He hit a 52-yarder. I was never against him. I was just questioning him.
All righty. Next is punting, and I'm going A. Jackson Ross had 5 punts. All 5 were inside the 20, Dave.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. It was good. All right. Then the return game. How did you break this up?
I just do it all together, but there was really only one return, and it's an A because Boo Carter had a heck of a return. You're right. Should have been an A+, but not blocking the punter pushes it down to an A.
And I mean, I know that Chris Fowler is supposed to say good things about both teams, but to say the punter is surprisingly athletic, I'm sorry. That just can't happen. The same way that Florida State goes back to that 99 Fiesta Bowl after the 98 season and says there's no way David Leverton can tackle Peter Warwick in open field, right?
Right, exactly.
You can't let the punter keep you from scoring.
No, you can't, particularly if it's open field. It's one thing if like there's other players that kind of force you a certain way and you end up running right into the punter and get tripped up. I've seen that happen, Dave. But if you're in the open field and the punter brings you down, like that's just embarrassing. Now I'll say this: punters are more athletes than kickers. I've never been as hard on punters as I have been on kickers, even though I just don't think people should punt. I don't think it's a smart decision, and it's an overdone decision. But that's literally a turnover, guys. But yeah. With report card, do we want to run to torchbearers, Dave?
Yes, let's go to torchbearers right now. It's brought to you by Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn.
To visit cctis.com. The information you need is easy to access, and setting an appointment is as simple as clicking the tab. Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn, and Eye Care Optical at cctis.com. Simply the best.
I want two more grades. First, coaching.
I'm being talked into a C- now. Tim Banks not doing it, maybe even a D. Tim Banks not doing any stunts, and Joey Halsley. I have not said this yet this year or ever under Josh Heupel, but this was a horrendously called offensive game.
It was good. The first drive was really good.
You're right. First drive was great.
Was pretty good. So
but
I would give them a C.
You know what? I thought the first quarter, the way they worked the tight ends, the whole goal was to have Georgia cheat up and then take those deep shots. And then they never took the deep shots. So, I mean, that was awful.
Okay, and then
and by the way, if we're grading officiating, it's a F-. But I want to point out Daniel got the name right. You're right, Daniel. I didn't know if it was Dylan Sampson or Jalen McMurray because I just seen number 6, but it's Jalen McMurray, Dave, that was unable to block the punter.
Okay, yeah. I didn't hear you say Dylan Sampson, but it was Jalen McMurray. And he was frustrated with it after. I mean, you've got to put that guy in the ground. You got to make his parents hurt. I mean, at that point, you've got to. That to me was befuddling. All right, so our torchbearers, the standouts for the Vols.
My first torchbearer is Amari Thomas, and this is why I'm not blaming the tackles too much. He batted down 2 balls at the line of scrimmage. He actually did a lot of what he was supposed to do and what his role is. So even though people are going to hate on the defensive line, I'm actually giving Amari Thomas a torchbearer award.
Are you sure that's not a little Memphian love from fellow Memphis native?
Who would you rather me give it to?
I don't know, but I wouldn't give it to anybody that had their hand on the ground on defense.
He batted down 2 balls, and he stopped the run. Georgia averaged less than 4 yards a carry.
I just don't.
You're the one who thought Amari Thomas could start on the 98 team. So, I've never said that.
Okay. I don't remember saying that. But anyway, who's our next torchbearer? Maybe I did. We say a lot on the program weekdays at 10 a.m.
Boo Carter is my next torchbearer. I thought Boo Carter actually played very, very, very well. And, there was the return, and he was actually very good on defense for most of the game. So Boo Carter is one of my torchbearers.
Yep. Got to block the punter. All right. Who's next?
He's not the one who missed the block, but
I know.
Next is Ricky Gibson. Played a heck of a game. Ricky Gibson honestly looked like an NFL cornerback tonight in this game.
Okay. I've got a surprise one coming down the pipe.
All right. My number one's so obvious because he's been the torchbearer all year. So can I just go to my number 1 and then do my number 2?
Yes.
I know that's a funny thing to say, but
do your number 2 whenever you feel like it. When you gotta go. Torchbearer is
Kate Foster's not around, but okay. So my number 1 is Dylan Sampson. I think Dylan Sampson was the player of the game again, and I thought they went away from him way too early.
Okay.
But my number 2 torchbearer, Dave, is Miles Kitselman, and Miles Kitselman.
Your number 1.
No, Dylan Sampson played better than Miles Kitselman, but I am high on Miles Kitselman, and I'll say this: as much as I criticize the offensive play calling, I got to keep giving kudos to Josh Heupel for getting under center on the goal line plays. I thank God that's coming back, Dave. in football, because honestly, the most mind-boggling thing to me is that Josh Heupel is somehow ahead of the curve because he does something that was just conventional wisdom for the first 100 years of football's existence.
Okay, now I have a torchbearer, but it's kind of on a curve.
All right.
Given the way he's played earlier this year. It's John Campbell. Wasn't called for a penalty.
Yeah, he was. He had a holding. Didn't
Okay,
he?
then I take that back. I missed the hold. I know that Hurd had a very costly false start. I don't know.
Very costly.
I think both of those tackles have played through a lot of injuries, and a lot was asked of them this year, especially Hurd being a first-year starter. So I guess subconsciously I'm kind of rooting for them a little bit, but it's just like they cannot play a clean football game, can they?
No, they can't. By the way, but since you are accusing
number
me of,
2 on the torchbearer that I picked.
since you're accusing me of being some loyal Memphian, I'm just going to throw Max Gilbert on there as a torchbearer, as a 6th torchbearer, because he's also from Memphis. Do you think I defended Max Gilbert so heavily because he's from Memphis, Dave?
You know what Max Gilbert needs to do? He needs to grow a beard, because he would gain a lot more respect if he didn't look like he was 12 and a half years old when they showed the picture of him getting ready to kick.
But he's a young kicker, and also, Dave, it's hard because kickers, I feel like kickers have more baby faces than look like they have more of a baby face than they do, because they're next to these warrior looking men, you know what I mean, that are gigantic.
By the way, speaking of, I was watching a documentary on facial hair, and the fact that you have a full beard means that your ancestors were warriors.
That's proven.
You know that? Yeah, that's pretty well. I don't know. Is evolution proven? All right.
I gotta ask a question, because we're bringing up false starts. What's the rule on that Carson Beck false start that was not called? I thought the quarterback could move in the pocket, or on the, because everybody's mad that on the final drive.
Yeah. No, I think he's supposed to set his feet. I can't tell you 100%, but I feel 90% certain he's not. That he can.
So but what happens if a quarterback can't walk up and change a play to the offensive line? They do that all the time.
Yeah, I would have. Let me get with an official on that. I've got a couple of officials that I could talk to. I'm not 100% certain on that, because it seemed like the in booth official was arguing with Herbstreit, right? But Herbstreit played quarterback, so I think he would know the rule.
Yeah, I would think so too.
I don't feel 100% certain. I feel 90% certain your feet.
By the way, those in booth officials, their job is to run cover for the officials. Have you ever heard them disagree with the official on a call?
But that's why I like the Blandino guy. Is he seems to go against the guys a lot of times. I don't know if he was ostracized from the official community or if he has been since, but there's one guy that just seems, I think it's Blandino, that just seems to every time not have the officials back. And they got to be like, what the H, man? Give us a break. You were one of us. But you're right. A lot of them do run cover for them. So, all right. At the end of the day, Tennessee is a 54% chance, as reported by ESPN, of making the college football playoff.
And that's a 54.
Yes.
That 54% chance factors in their chances of winning out. So there is obviously some sort of prospect that they lose one of these 2 games. So if they win out, in reality, they effectively control their own destiny, because then you push it up to 70% probably.
No. The ESPN model factors in that they would win the 2 favored games.
But their ESPN model factors in there is a % possibility that they lose one of those 2 games.
Well, I don't feel like they control their own destiny. Do you?
Not 100%, but I say 70% control their own destiny.
Okay. I think it's about 50. But, yeah, we'll see what happens. There was no major change. I mean, Arkansas playing Texas tough, maybe that doesn't look like as much of a loss. South Carolina beating Missouri further knocks them down the chain, but that's not a common opponent in any sense of the matter. Were there any other games that you think affected the college football playoff chances for Tennessee today?
Nothing that hurt Tennessee, but nothing that helped Tennessee. It stayed static. The only one that may have is Florida beating LSU was a real big benefit to Tennessee. I will say this, though, if people are going to complain about the officiating and complain about Tennessee, because there's going to be somebody that could get left out. I've told you this. Ole Miss beat Georgia. Georgia beat Tennessee. Tennessee beat Alabama. Alabama beat Georgia. Somebody's going to get left out who beat somebody else. And here's going to be the problem, Dave. If you're Tennessee, yes, you can complain about the officiating in this game, and you can complain that you beat Alabama. You lost to a really bad Arkansas team on the road. That's now going to start working against you a little bit more.
I don't know if they're really bad.
They
As a
haven't
matter of
given.
fact, they're better than I thought they would be preseason.
They're going to finish 6-6. They haven't put up a fight against
I thought they were a 4-win team before the year.
But Dave, they haven't put up a fight against anybody since that win against Tennessee.
Okay, but what's the bigger factor, the Arkansas loss or the fact that this looks like a one-sided game if you just look at the final score? Because I don't trust these committee members to really watch the entire game. So given that as a backdrop, Caleb, what's the more damning aspect of what Tennessee has done this year? The loss to Arkansas or the fact that a loss to Georgia looks one-sided if you don't watch the game?
Oh, I think the loss to Arkansas, because most of these losses on the road have looked one-sided. Georgia lost by 18 to Ole Miss last week. So I think that Arkansas loss is going to do them some serious damage. And also, here's the other thing that's really not helping them, Dave. Tennessee's the one team in the college football playoff race that has yet to beat more than one bowl-eligible team at this moment. And we're heading into the final 2 weeks of the season, and they've only beaten one bowl-eligible team.
If you had to bet your mortgage on it, Tennessee make the college football playoff.
I still say they do, but I think that they have a lot more selling to do. Now, what's going to help Tennessee? When Arkansas beats Louisiana Tech, and if Florida beats Florida State, both those teams are bowl eligible. That's 3 bowl eligible wins. NC State could still get bowl eligible. Oklahoma could still get bowl eligible. So Tennessee has a path to say they beat like 5 bowl eligible teams. But as of this moment, Alabama is the only decent win Tennessee has.
But that's a really good win.
It's a heck of a win. But they're going to have to sell a little bit more. I think they're in, but put it this way, Tennessee needs Ohio State to beat Indiana. They need Ohio State to not just beat Indiana. They need Ohio State to beat the brakes off Indiana.
Yep. All right, he's
That's
Caleb
it.
Calhoun. I'm Dave Hooker. Last look brought to you by Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn. Enjoy life better when you see better. CCTeyes.com. CCTeyes.com. Click the thumbs up button. Make sure you've liked and subscribed and have notifications on, as we'll have the Vol Report with Cooper Mays brought to you by City Heating and Air Conditioning. We also have a little show that we like to do each and every weekday at 10 a.m. So turn the notifications on. Leave us a review. No matter what podcast platform you're on, we greatly appreciate it. Monday, we'll be joined by Jacob Warren, former Ball. Tuesday, John Adams of the News Sentinel. Wednesday, we'll be joined by Jimmy Himes. Then Thursday, we'll be joined by Will West, other guests along the week. And then Friday, we wrap it up with Ollie Lane. For Caleb Calhoun, I'm Dave Hooker.